The metallic crash of aluminum trays echoed through the cafeteria like thunder. Hot chocolate milk cascaded down Harper Sinclair's brown hair, dripping onto her worn uniform as three towering figures circled her like predators. 400 students fell silent, their forks frozen midway to their mouths, witnessing what would become the most shocking 45 seconds in Blackstone Prep Academy's history. Harper knelt among scattered food, blood trickling from her split lip. But something in her eyes made even the bravest students look away. She glanced at her watch and whispered with unsettling calm, 3, 2, 1. Within the next hour, all three of her attackers would be carried out on stretchers, and a scandal that would destroy one of America's most prestigious schools would begin to unravel. The morning had started like any other at Blackstone Prep, where $100,000 cars filled the student parking lot and trust funds determined social hierarchy. Harper had transferred in 3 months ago, a scholarship student whose second-hand uniform and quiet demeanor marked her as prey in this ecosystem of privilege. If you've ever felt powerless against bullies, or wondered what would happen if victims fought back, this story will show you that sometimes the hunted become the hunters. Please take a moment to like this video and share your own experiences in the comments below, because every voice matters in the fight against bullying. Bryce Wellington stood over Harper, his $2,000 Letterman jacket pristine despite the chaos he'd created. The quarterback's perfectly styled blonde hair and blue eyes that had graced 3 magazine covers masked a predator who'd driven 5 students to transfer schools, and worse. Beside him, Garrett Pierce cracked his knuckles, the state wrestling champion whose academic scholarship hid his true passion for inflicting pain. Noah Blackwood completed the trinity of terror, his father's position as principal providing immunity for every cruel act. "Scholarship trash should know their place," Bryce announced to his audience, ensuring everyone heard his performance. The cafeteria's acoustics carried his words perfectly, just as Harper had calculated when she'd chosen this exact spot to sit every day for 3 months. She'd endured their escalating campaign of harassment with puzzling patience. First came the locker graffiti, crude drawings that maintenance mysteriously never quite managed to remove completely. Then, the doctored photos spread through encrypted messaging apps, sophisticated deepfakes that Garrett's computer skills made disturbingly realistic. Last week, they'd slashed her tires with surgical precision, leaving her stranded until midnight. But today was different. Today, Harper had refused their monthly protection fee of $500. Money they didn't need, but demanded as tribute from every scholarship student. The refusal wasn't about money. Harper had saved every penny from her part-time job. It was about timing. She needed them angry, reckless, and public. "Every word is being recorded," Harper said quietly, her voice steady despite the blood on her chin. "Please, continue." Garrett's eyes narrowed with the first flicker of suspicion, but Bryce's ego was already in overdrive. 3 months of unchallenged dominance had made him careless. He grabbed Harper's worn backpack, dumping its contents across the floor. Textbooks landed in puddles of spilled drinks, but Harper's focus remained on something else entirely. Her laptop, safely tucked against her ribs, contained a folder labeled "Justice for Lily" that these boys would soon wish they'd never forced her to open. "Recording? With what?" Noah laughed, kicking Harper's ancient flip phone across the floor. "Your welfare technology?" The crowd laughed nervously, that uncomfortable sound of people who knew they were witnessing something wrong, but were too afraid to intervene. Among them, a few students shifted uneasily, remembering friends who'd faced similar treatment. Others raised their phones, documenting what they thought would be another viral humiliation video. They had no idea They were recording evidence for a federal investigation. Harper's breathing remained oddly controlled, a pattern that would have alarmed anyone trained in combat. 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out. The tactical breathing of someone preparing for violence, not receiving it. When she wiped blood from her lip, the movement revealed knuckles bearing old calluses, the kind earned through thousands of hours striking heavy bags, not from writing essays. "Stand her up," Bryce commanded. "Time for the scholarship student to learn about consequences." Noah grabbed Harper's left wrist, twisting it behind her back with practiced cruelty. The position should have caused Harper to cry out, to struggle reflexively against the pain. Instead, she micro-adjusted her stance, shifting her weight almost imperceptibly to her back foot. Garrett, more observant than his friends, noticed the subtle movement. "Yo, why are her muscles so tense?" he muttered, but his warning was lost in Bryce's theatrical performance. "You see, Harper," Bryce said, projecting his voice for maximum impact, "Blackstone Prep has a natural order. Legacy students like us, we're the apex predators. Scholarship charity cases like you? You're prey. It's simple biology." Harper's response was so quiet, only the 3 boys heard it. "My sister said the same thing, right before she died." The words hit like ice water, but Bryce's momentum was unstoppable. He'd performed this routine too many times, reduced too many students to tears and transfer applications. He reached for the tray of hot soup that Garrett had strategically positioned nearby, the cafeteria's famous clam chowder that left second-degree burns if spilled accidentally. "Final lesson for scholarship trash," Bryce announced, hefting the tray. "Sometimes you need to accept your place in the food chain." That's when Harper smiled. Not the nervous smile of a victim trying to appease their attacker, but the cold, calculated smile of someone whose trap had just been sprung. She looked at her watch again. 45 seconds. That's all she would need. Harper's transformation happened between heartbeats. The meek scholarship student evaporated like morning mist, replaced by something that made primitive survival instincts scream warnings in every witness's mind. Her body language shifted from prey to predator so dramatically that several students stepped back involuntarily. She whispered one word: "Lily." The next sequence of events would be analyzed frame by frame in courtrooms, news stations, and federal investigations for months to come. Harper exploded from her kneeling position with the explosive power of a compressed spring. Using Noah's grip on her wrist as a pivot point, she flowed into a textbook judo throw that sent the principal's son airborne. His body traced a perfect arc before crashing into a nearby table with enough force to snap it in half. Garrett's wrestling instincts kicked in immediately. The state champion charged forward with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a match. But wrestling has rules, refs, and the assumption that your opponent doesn't want to seriously hurt you. Harper operated under no such constraints. She slipped his tackle with the fluid grace of water flowing around a rock, redirecting his momentum with a Krav Maga technique designed for battlefield efficiency. Garrett's face met the cafeteria's brick wall with a wet crunch that would require extensive dental reconstruction. Bryce stood frozen for a crucial second, his brain struggling to process how his victim had become his predator. That second cost him dearly. Harper's spinning heel kick, thrown with the perfect form of someone who'd practiced it 10,000 times, caught him just below the ribs. The quarterback folded like a broken marionette, his designer shoes skidding across the floor as he gasped for air that wouldn't come. The entire confrontation lasted 43 seconds. Harper had been precise about the timing. She stood in the center of the carnage, surrounded by 3 of Blackstone's most feared students, all writhing on the ground in various states of consciousness. The cafeteria remained dead silent, except for the drip of spilled soup and the groans of the fallen. Harper touched her smartwatch, a device that looked nothing like the consumer models her classmates wore. The military-grade tactical watch had been recording everything in 360-degree audio and video with night vision capability. Every threat, every assault, every word had been captured with timestamped GPS coordinates and uploaded to encrypted cloud servers in real time. The evidence was already inadmissible in federal court, backed up across multiple jurisdictions. "My name is Harper St. Clair," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. 3 years ago, my sister Lily took her own life after being bullied by boys just like these. She was 14. The revelation rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Several students lowered their phones, suddenly understanding they weren't recording a simple fight, but something far more profound. Harper walked to her scattered belongings, picking up her laptop with deliberate care. When she opened it, the screen displayed a dashboard that made several computer science students gasp. Terabytes of data scrolled past: video files, audio recordings, document scans, metadata trails. "For the past 6 months, I've been visiting schools like Blackstone," Harper continued, her voice steady despite the blood still trickling from her lip. "Schools where money buys silence and victims disappear into transfer paperwork or worse. Every incident you've witnessed, every cruel act you've stayed quiet about, every time you've looked away, it's all here." She pulled out her phone, not the ancient flip phone Noah had kicked away, but a second device that had been concealed in a hidden pocket. The interface that appeared wasn't any normal messaging app, but a specialized legal assistance platform that only high-end law firms could afford. The AI-powered system could analyze video evidence in real time, match observed behaviors to criminal codes, and generate ready-to-file legal documents. As Harper uploaded the fight video, the app immediately identified 17 distinct criminal violations, suggested prosecution strategies, and calculated potential sentences based on precedent cases. Within seconds, it had prepared a comprehensive case file that would typically take a legal team days to compile. "Director Chen?" Harper spoke into the phone, her voice carrying the professional tone of someone making a routine report. "Evidence package complete. You have probable cause for the warrants." The name sent chills through several students who recognized it from news reports. Special Agent Director Michelle Chen headed the FBI's Education Corruption Task Force, a unit created specifically to investigate systemic abuse in elite institutions. The sound of sirens, faint at first but growing louder, provided an ominous soundtrack to Harper's next words. "Bryce Wellington," she said, standing over the gasping quarterback. 16 counts of assault, 3 counts of sexual harassment, 1 count of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. That party last year where Ashley Morrison overdosed? She didn't take those drugs voluntarily. Bryce's face went from red to white as Harper continued her litany. Garrett Pierce. 22 counts of cyber terrorism, identity theft, and production of revenge pornography. Did you really think using Ukrainian proxy servers would hide your IP address forever? She turned to Noah, who was struggling to sit up against the broken table. Noah Blackwood. 38 counts of witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. Every time Daddy covered up an incident, every falsified disciplinary record, every threat made to silence victims, it's all documented. But Harper wasn't finished. She connected her laptop to the cafeteria's main display, typically used for lunch menus and announcements. The screen flickered to life with a folder structure that made Principal Blackwood, watching from his office security feed, reach for his phone with shaking hands. But it was too late. The FBI's Cyber Crimes Unit had already frozen all his accounts and communications. The screen showed 5 folders, each named after a student. 5 names that sent a collective gasp through the assembled crowd. These weren't just any students. They were the ones who'd left suddenly. Their departures explained away with vague excuses about family moves or academic opportunities elsewhere. Harper clicked on the first folder. Sarah Chen, September 2021. A video began playing. Sarah, a brilliant freshman who'd earned a perfect SAT score, sitting in what looked like a therapist's office. Her voice, broken by tears, described months of escalating harassment. The timestamp showed this was recorded 3 days before her family emergency transfer. The video included screenshots of messages from Bryce, Garrett, and Noah, each more vicious than the last. The final message, sent the night before Sarah's departure, was a detailed threat involving her younger brother, who attended the nearby middle school. "She didn't transfer," Harper said quietly. "She's in witness protection." The cafeteria doors burst open with coordinated precision. FBI agents in tactical gear swept in, followed by state police and what looked like an entire evidence collection unit. Principal Blackwood was escorted out in handcuffs, his desperate protests about donations and connections falling on deaf ears. Behind him came 3 members of the school board, their designer suits incongruous with the federal restraints binding their wrists. Special Agent Director Chen entered last, her presence commanding despite her modest stature. She looked remarkably like an older version of Harper, if Harper had chosen badges over battles. The family resemblance wasn't coincidental. Trauma had a way of creating unlikely alliances between those who'd lost sisters to the same kind of evil. Director Chen surveyed the cafeteria with the practiced eye of someone who'd witnessed too many crime scenes in schools that should have been sanctuaries. She nodded at Harper with professional approval tinged with something deeper, the shared understanding of sisters lost to preventable tragedies. The federal agents moved with choreographed efficiency, securing evidence and reading rights to the growing collection of handcuffed administrators. "Harper Sinclair," Director Chen announced formally, though her eyes held warmth. "Outstanding work. The task force has been trying to crack Blackstone's network for 3 years. Your evidence provided the missing pieces." Paramedics arrived to tend to Bryce, Garrett, and Noah, though Harper had been precise in her application of force. Bruised ribs, a broken nose, and a mild concussion. Painful, but nothing permanent. Unlike the damage they'd inflicted on their victims' souls, Harper's justice came with an expiration date measured in weeks, not lifetimes. As Bryce was loaded onto a stretcher, still wheezing from the solar plexus strike, Harper leaned close enough for only him to hear. "That kick! My sister taught me that move. She was a second-degree black belt who chose kindness over violence every single day. Until you and others like you convinced her that kindness was weakness." The quarterback's eyes widened with the first genuine emotion he'd shown in years. Fear. Not the theatrical fear of consequences he could buy his way out of, but the primal terror of realizing he'd fundamentally misunderstood the nature of power. Students began providing statements to federal agents, a flood of testimony that had been dammed up by fear for too long. The stories poured out. Extortion rackets disguised as tradition, assault covered up as hazing, academic sabotage presented as competition. Each revelation added years to potential sentences, transforming what might have been misdemeanor charges into federal cases that would follow the perpetrators for life. Harper's laptop continued displaying evidence on the cafeteria screens, a methodical presentation that revealed the scope of her operation. Maps appeared showing 21 red pins across 15 states, each marking a school where similar corruption festered. Blackstone was number 17. The previous 16 had already fallen, their administrations gutted, their bullies facing justice, their victims finally free to speak. "You're not just a student," someone said behind Harper. She turned to find Mrs. Patterson, the AP literature teacher who'd always seemed to see too much. "You're part of something bigger." Harper neither confirmed nor denied, but her slight smile spoke volumes. The truth was both simpler and more complex than anyone could guess. After Lily's death, Harper had indeed become part of something bigger, not a formal organization but a loose network of survivors who'd transformed their trauma into purpose. Some became lawyers specializing in education law. Others pursued psychology to help victims heal. Harper had chosen a more direct path, using her exceptional intelligence and martial arts training to become something between an undercover agent and an avenging angel. The evidence presentation reached its climax with a folder simply labeled "The Network." Inside were connections that made several law enforcement officials reach for their phones. Blackstone wasn't an isolated cancer, but part of a metastatic disease spreading through America's elite educational institutions. Admissions fraud, grade manipulation, and systematic abuse were just symptoms of a deeper rot where privilege had mutated into predation. Financial records scrolled past, showing millions in laundered donations, bribes disguised as charity contributions, and hush money labeled as consulting fees. The web connected boarding schools, prep academies, and even several Ivy League institutions whose admissions departments had been compromised. Every document was authenticated, every transaction traced, every connection verified. Harper's 6 months at various schools hadn't just been about gathering evidence. She'd been mapping an entire ecosystem of corruption. "Holy cow," whistled Agent Martinez, studying the financial trails. "This goes all the way to Washington." Director Chen's expression darkened. "Contact the Attorney General. We're going to need a joint task force with Treasury and Education." She turned to Harper. "You realize what you've started." "I realize what they started," Harper corrected quietly, "when they decided children's lives were acceptable collateral for maintaining their power." As the last of the conspirators were led away, the cafeteria began to empty. Students walked out different than they'd entered, carrying the weight of witnessed justice, and the lighter burden of fear finally lifted. Several approached Harper, some offering thanks, others simply nodding in recognition of what she'd sacrificed to save them from similar fates. But the story wasn't quite over. As Harper packed her laptop, the screen flashed with an encrypted message that made her freeze. The sender was anonymous, but the content was specific. "Phoenix Protocol activated. Chicago situation critical. Lily would understand." Phoenix. The code name she'd earned after rising from the ashes of her sister's death. Someone from the network was calling for help, invoking Lily's name to signal the severity. Harper's jaw tightened as she read the attached file. 3 student suicides in the past month at an elite Chicago prep school. The pattern was achingly familiar. She looked around the cafeteria, one last time, memorizing faces of students who would now have a chance at normal lives. Her work here was done, but the mission continued. Evil didn't take breaks, and neither could she. Director Chen caught her eye, reading the determination there. "Another school?" the agent asked quietly. Harper nodded, already mentally preparing for another transformation, another identity, another battle against those who preyed on the vulnerable. But as she turned to leave, a voice stopped her cold. "I know who you really are." The speaker was a girl Harper had never seen before, standing in the shadows near the exit. Pale, thin, with eyes that held too much knowledge for her apparent age. She wore a Blackstone uniform, but something about her presence felt wrong, like a photograph where the shadows fell in impossible directions. "Everyone knows who I am now," Harper replied carefully, hand instinctively moving to a defensive position. The girl smiled, an expression that didn't reach her eyes. No, they know who Harper Sinclair is, but I know about the others. Madison, Sophia, Emma, all the names you've worn, all the schools you've saved. She stepped closer, and Harper noticed she walked without making sound. Lily's army is impressive, but you're not the only ones hunting monsters in schools. Harper's blood chilled. No one outside the network knew that term. No one alive, anyway. Who are you? Someone who's been watching. Someone who's been waiting. The girl pulled out a phone, showing a map similar to Harper's, but with different markers. Blue pins instead of red, dozens of them, spread across not just America, but the entire globe. Your sister wasn't the first to die. She won't be the last. Unless what? The girl's smile widened. Unless we stop playing defense and start hunting the source. The real puppeteers who create these little kingdoms of cruelty. She handed Harper a black business card with only a symbol, a phoenix rising from a fallen angel's wings. When you're ready to graduate from saving schools to saving generations, call this number. Then she was gone, vanishing into the crowd of evacuating students like smoke dissolving in the wind. Harper stood alone, holding the card, feeling the weight of a larger war she'd only glimpsed the edges of. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with the Chicago file, urgent and demanding. 21 schools had been her goal, but now she wondered if she'd been thinking too small. She looked at the card again, then at her phone showing the Chicago crisis, the immediate need versus the larger threat. Lily would have known what to do. She'd always seen the bigger picture, always chosen the harder path that helped more people. Harper made her decision, slipping the card into her wallet next to Lily's photo. Chicago first. The children there needed her now. But someday, when the 21 schools were saved, and Lily's army had proven that bullies could be beaten, she'd make that call. Because the girl in the shadows was right about one thing. They were playing defense in a war that required offense. As Harper walked out of Blackstone Prep for the last time, she passed under the school's motto, etched in marble, character through privilege. Someone had already started chiseling it off, preparing for whatever would replace a lie that had stood for 100 years. Behind her, in the cafeteria, federal agents continued processing the crime scene that had once been a kingdom of cruelty. Harper smiled, a real smile this time, thinking of Lily and all the sisters, brothers, friends lost to the casual evil of those who mistook wealth for worth. She touched the scar on her wrist, the one she'd gotten trying to cut Lily down in time, failing by seconds that felt like centuries. The scar would always be there, but so would the purpose it had given her. 21 schools down, she whispered to the ghost that walked beside her always. Infinity to go. The war against bullies had no end point, no final victory condition. There would always be predators who saw kindness as weakness, always be those who used power to break rather than build.